Hi. It's time to get started. It's a quick shear. It's a quick shear today. So I'll get you out of here so Moshe can make his plane. We're on Daf Ayin Zayin Amid Aleph. At the very top of the Daf, Amar Ameimar. Tomorrow morning there'll only be one Daf Yomi Shir, and that'll be after the first minyan. So it'll probably be around 7 a.m. will be the first Daf Yomi Shir, maybe between 7 and 7:10 a.m. will be the first Shir, and then so if you want to come for the Shir and then go to Shachris, you can do that as well. Either way. Okay. Yesterday there was a discussion as to whether if you want to transfer ownership of, let's say, a promissory note, the shtar, is Masira, just giving over the shtar, sufficient? Or is there an additional kinyan that's necessary, which is to write a shtar to demarcate that there's been a transfer of this note? Furthermore, does the shtar itself even help? Let's say I give a person a shtar saying you now become the owner of the note, and you haven't yet taken possession of the note. Does the note become yours? All of that is tied together in this shaila. The Gemara had presented a machlokas whether osios niknos b'mesira, can you just acquire a shtar through taking physical acquisition of it, or must there be another process that accompanies it together with it? So that's the machlokas, and in the final psak halacha, Amar Ameimar hilchasa osios niknos b'mesira. Ameimar says that the final psak is that just physical transfer of a shtar makes the new holder of it the owner. So if, let's say, I want to sell a debt, people would sell debts all the time. Let's say Alan owes me $1,000. And I don't want to wait, I don't want to hound him, I don't want to constantly hock him a chinik, it's going to take 6 months. So I go over to Bob and I say, Bob, listen, for $800 you can become the owner of $1,000 debt with Alan. And and go ahead and I'll be free of it and you go ahead. So you give me $800 and I just give you the shtar, right? Or I just give you the shtar as a gift. I say, here, you can collect it from Alan. I don't want to have to be bothered with it, right? So that in itself, says Ameimar, is sufficient to make you the owner of the shtar. So you now become the owner of that debt. Okay, so we don't need to draw up a new contract. That's what basically the Gemara is saying. And that's like Rabbi had discussed in yesterday's daf. So Amar le Ravashi la Ameimar Gemara Osvara. So the question that is now asked to Ameimar from Ravashi says, is that just a tradition that you have that is without logical basis? Or is there svara to it as well? Is there logic to this psak that all you need to do is physically transfer the shtar? So Amar le Gemara. So he said to him, no, there's logic. He said to him, no, it's only a mesora. So Amar Ravashi svara namihu, da osios milininu umili b'mili lo mikne. So Ravashi says, I can offer a logic to it as well. What's the logic? The logic is that a shtar is merely words. It's really words that are committed to writing. And words can connote or denote a halachic reality. That my ownership of these words makes me the owner of a debt that Alan owes me $1,000. So if I want to transfer that, how can I do that with other words? In other words, either my giving over of the shtar to Bob works or it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, the physical transfer of those words, then how can additional words in any way augment the first words? Words are words. They're either transferable or they're non-transferable. If they're transferable, then I can just transfer them physically over to Bob. If they're non-transferable, then how do additional words in any way create a change in status? That's basically the point. And so therefore you have to conclude that the physical transfer of those words in the shtar is all that is necessary, and they don't have to be in any way augmented by an additional shtar. So the Gemara now says, Velo. Really? Is that what you're telling me? That words just by physical transfer is sufficient and words do not in any way augment other words? Let me prove to you that that's not the case. I'm going to bring you now a raya that words can augment other words. Now, what do we mean by that? Because Veha Amar Rabba bar Yitzchak, Amar Rav. So Mendel, come here. I have a deal for you, Mendel. I'm making you my shliach to make a kinyan with people, and then so you can make a kinyan with anyone who wants to sell their chametz, and then when we're done with the shir,
I'm coming to the shir.
I know. So, but just make
take it. Okay.
just make a quick kinyan with him. Okay.
Those are mere words.
What?
I didn't see a Kenyan.
Okay, shkoyach. So ve'amar Rabba bar Yitzchak Amar Rav Shnei Shtarosei. Rabba bar Yitzchak says that in the following case, there are two different laws having to do with the contract. What is the case? A guy goes over to a group of people and he says, Zaku b'sadazu leploni v'kisfelo es hashtar. He says to a group of guys, he says, listen, I want you to make a kinyan on this field on behalf of Ploni, that I want to give Ploni this field as a gift. And furthermore, I want you to make a shtar, write it up, and give the shtar to Ploni, demarcating that he is the new owner of the property. So what's the halach in that case? Chozer b'shtar ve'eno chozer b'sada. In that situation, once those group of guys make a kinyan by digging on the field or whatever kind of kinyan they're going to make through a chazaka, so the halacha is, let's say the gifter changes his mind and he says, you know what, I really don't want to give him that gift anymore. Well, I'm sorry, sir. They've already made a kinyan on behalf of the recipient, on behalf of Ploni. You can't go back on the gift. It's an irrevocable gift. But let's say he says, but I don't want you, I know you've written up the shtar already, I don't want you to give him the shtar that says that he's the new owner. That he is able to do. And that's halacha number one. Before that shtar reaches the giftee's hands, I, as the gifter, can say, no, I don't want him to receive the shtar. Now, why would I not want him to receive the shtar? There could be a number of reasons. Maybe he's the legal owner, but I don't want it to be publicly recorded. I don't want him to have a public record. I don't want him to have the proof of ownership, because maybe I'd like to reserve some level of rights to still maintain in that property. It's not 100% clear why I wouldn't want him to have the shtar, but maybe it's an embarrassment that I don't want my wife to know about it, or whatever it is. I don't want people to know about it until maybe after I've left the world. I don't want him to be able to wave the shtar around and show people that he's now the recipient. Okay? So that I have a right to do. Almanas shetich, so that's halacha number one. Halacha number two in this case with the shtar is Almanas shetichtuvu lo es hashtar chozer bein bishtar bein besada. Let's say the gifter, instead of saying two separate statements, make a kinyan on the field and write him a shtar that he's the new owner, he says as follows: I want you to write a shtar that he's the new owner on the condition, or let's say I want you to make a kinyan, but the kinyan will only work when you deliver the shtar to him. In other words, I don't want him to become the owner until he actually receives the shtar in hand that he's the owner. So in that situation, even after they make a kinyan on the field on behalf of Ploni, as long as they have not delivered the shtar into the hand of the giftee of this Ploni, the gifter can be chozer, he can change his mind and he can say, I've decided the deal is off. That's halacha number two with this shtar case. And the reason is because he made it contingent upon the guy receiving the shtar in hand. So as long as he has not yet received the shtar in hand, he can retract it. So Amar Rav Huna shlosha shtarosei. Comes along Rav Huna and he says, I have a third halacha that's relevant to that case of a person gifting or selling a person property with a shtar. So trei hada amar, and the first two are like you've said, but the third one is like this: Idach in kada mocher v'kasav es hashtar ka'osa sheshaninu kosfen shtar lamocher afal pi she'ein lokeach ima. What would be a situation where Ruvain decides, you know what, Ruvain is strapped for cash, and he needs to sell this property ASAP, and so he decides he's able to identify Shimon as a potential buyer. But he's worried that if he doesn't come forward with an immediate shtar mechira, a bill of sale at the time when he confronts Shimon and says he knows that Shimon has a lot of cash, but if Shimon's going to balk if he's got to have to wait for Reuven to write up a shtar. So he decides, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write up a shtar that designates Shimon as the new owner of this property, and I'll write it up in advance, right? And then when Shimon gives me the cash, I'll give him the shtar. The halacha is that a seller has a right to do that, even though a seller is potentially weakening his position by writing a shtar mechira in advance. Because what happens if he loses the shtar and then someone picks it up and finds it? It's going to mean that Shimon is going to be given the shtar even though he never paid for it. But if Reuven says, I want to do it, I'm willing to take the risk, he has every right to do so. So in that situation, Kevin shehech zigzeh bekarka nikna shtar b'chol makom shehu. V'zuhi sheshaninu nechasim shein lamachrayas niknim in nechasim sheish lamachrayas. And so the halacha is that as soon as Shimon, the buyer, makes a kinyan in the property. In other words, basically what Reuven tells Shimon is, listen, I wrote up a bill of sale. My Adam here can testify that the bill of sale is in my house. All you have to do is give me the cash, make a kinyan in the property, and the bill of sale is yours. And it'll be delivered over to your house in just a few minutes. So as soon as Shimon makes a kinyan on the property, not only has he acquired the property, but he's also been kona the shtar as well. And this is akin to what our sages told us in other places, that when a person makes a kinyan on real estate, he automatically, if there's a package deal of both real estate and chattel, as soon as he makes a kinyan on the real estate, he automatically acquires the chattel. The chattel in this case being the shtar, being the contract or the bill of sale. The Gemara's question, and this is the way the Rashbam speaks out the question. It's a little bit strange, the way that the Gemara wants to bring a raya from here, but listen to the Gemara's argument at this point. This is the Havamina of the Gemara. The Gemara's argument is, you see from here that a mere verbal declaration that the shtar is yours makes a shtar yours even without any physical transfer. So that's really essentially what's happening here. Reuven is selling the property to Shimon. He says, Shimon, here, make a kinyan on the real estate, and then you will be the owner of the real estate and the owner of the shtar. And the Gemara's Havamina at this point is that he's acquiring the shtar through that verbal declaration. Now, if you can acquire a shtar through verbal declaration, you see that words can help words. Words, my verbal declaration that the shtar is yours, actually affect a transfer of ownership of words. So therefore, your whole argument was that the reason why all you have to do is physically transfer the shtar in order for that to affect a change of owner of the shtar is because that's the only way that you can transfer ownership of words, because words can't transfer words. But here's an argument that shows that words can transfer words. My mere verbal declaration that you're the new owner of the shtar, of the bill of the deed on the property, makes you the owner. So you see that not like what you just said. So the Gemara answers. That through any one of these methods, you can acquire both real estate and chattel concomitantly with the real estate through one of the three methods of kinyan of real estate, either through cash, through a shtar, or through making a kinyan of chazaka. So that's the end of the question. So the Gemara's answer is agav shayin. The Gemara says you're mistaken. The method of kinyan of that deed on the property is not through a verbal declaration, but rather through Shimon's physical kinyan in the real estate. When you make a physical kinyan in real estate, that's called the kinyan agav. That through acquiring the real estate, you acquire accompanying chattel that's included in the package, even if the chattel is not on the real estate. But by the way, this idea of kinyan agav is something that we're going to be doing this evening and tomorrow morning when we sell the chametz to the Gentile. Because there's several methods of kinyan that we will employ in order to sell your chametz to a non-Jew. One of the methods is called kinyan agav, where basically we're saying we're going to go to TED tomorrow, and this evening also for the people who want an early sale, people who are going to Eretz Yisrael. And we're going to say to TED, one of the methods that we would like you to acquire the chametz is acquire the real estate where the chametz is currently resting, people's cabinets, closets, cellars, and so forth, and concomitantly through your acquisition of their real estate, you will also acquire the chametz that is resting upon that real estate. So Ted now becomes not only an owner of chametz, he becomes an owner of people's real estate as well, which is probably pretty valuable when you take the aggregate. He's making a great killing on this deal.
33% higher this year than last year.
That's right.
That's right. Going to charge him more
I
this
could
year?
charge him more this year. So basically, the reason I'm telling you this is because I wanted you to know that Ted knows this stuff solid. He knows this Gemara really well. I've explained it to him now for several years that what a kinyan agav is. It's only one of the methods. We use about 5 or 6 different methods of kinyan, but this is one of the methods of kinyan.
The Havamina is so weak. It starts off by
I
saying
grant you.
Agav.
I grant you that it's a strange havamina, right? Okay.
You won't be able to go in that into your any real estate where your comment says you won't be able to go into that.
No, because part of the contract is that Ted hereby agrees that a person who sold his chametz to him has rights of access. Can still walk through the areas where his chametz is presently. It's one of the clauses in the real estate, in the shtar. Anyway, daha matbeya delo nikni b'chalipen va'agav ara nikni. And the Gemara says, and I'll prove that to you. I'll prove to you that the way that Shimon acquires the shtar is not through the verbal declaration of Ruvain, but rather through the kinyan agav, the acquisition via the real estate. You know how I know that? Because there's another Gemara in Bava Basra that talks about coins. Now, coins, normally, a kinyan chalipin, which is where there's a quid pro quo. I give you something and I acquire something of yours. So I give you a handkerchief and I acquire, let's say, a piece of property of yours. That works with property, it works with chattel, but it doesn't work with coins. It doesn't work with coins. Gemara explains why. So normally you cannot do a kinyan chalipin to exchange coins. However, if you do a kinyan agav, where the exchange is not only real estate but coins as part of the package, then you can use a kinyan chalipin. I give you a handkerchief and I acquire your land together with coins. So you see that the method of kinyan is not through the chalipin, it's not through the verbal declaration, but rather it's through the kinyan agav, through the acquisition of real estate. And this was the case. Ki hada Rav Papa, we learned this not too long ago. Story of Rav Papa, Havule Tracer Alfi Zuze Bechozoi, that he was a creditor. People in this place called Bechozoi owed him 12,000 dinars. It's a lot of money. And the problem was, how is he going to, it's a big schlep. Rav Papa doesn't want to schlep all the way to Bechozoi to collect the debt. And they don't want to schlep all the way here to deliver the money. So how's he going to get the cash? So Akninu Nihalala Rav Shmuel Bar Acha Agav Asif Devese, and so what he did was he took one of his Talmidim and he said, listen, I need you to travel to Bechozoi, or maybe he was going anyway. Do me a favor, pick up the money. But I know they're not going to give you the money if you're just my shaliach. You know why? Because the halacha is that if you're just the shaliach, if any onus, if any mishap happens on the road while he's en route, then you're still liable because the money hasn't gotten to me yet. So therefore, I'm going to make you, Rav Shmuel, the owner of the coins that are in the house of Bechozoi. How did he do it? He said, here, make a kinyan on the threshold of my house, so you now become the owner of my threshold. And he said, concomitantly with that acquisition of the threshold, you will also acquire the coins that are in Bechozoi. So that way, and I'll write you a shtar to that effect, and that way, when you pick up the coins in Bechozoi, you'll show them that you're the owner, and therefore, once they deliver the coins to you, they're totally off the hook. So he did that, and he did that. And Rav Papa was so overjoyed to be able to retrieve his coins that he ran out to a place called Tavech, which is almost like halfway there, to greet Rav Shmuel and give him a big hug for bringing back his money.
Go ahead.
Making sure he has it.
Making sure he has the money.
Yeah, right.
That's why he hugs her. To make sure you know.
So remember, the Mishnah had talked about hamocher is asfina, when you sell a boat. And so the Mishnah had said that not included in the sale under normal circumstances are the bags, the big canvas bags that contain all of the goods, and the antiki. What does the word antiki mean? My antiki. It almost sounds like antique, doesn't it? It could be that's what it means, because Amar of Papa, iska de begava. Any of the merchandise that is in the bags is also not included in the sale. So people travel by sea. The pirates, they bring buried treasure and all that stuff. Maybe that's where we get the word antique from. I don't know. Next Mishnah. Mocher es hakron lomocher es haprados, mocher es haprados lomocher es hakron. The next Mishnah does not deal with a ship anymore. It's dealing with things on land. If you want to sell a wagon, if I stipulate I'm selling you my wagon that is normally drawn by mules, the mules are not included in the sale. And if I sell you mules who normally draw a wagon, then the wagon is not included in the sale. In other words, you have to stipulate, if you want to sell both, you got to stipulate both the wagon and the mules. Similarly, if a person is selling a yoke, the whites are not included. No, sorry, I had to say that. If a person is selling a yoke, Y-O-K-E, he has not sold the cattle that normally are attached to the yoke. But if he sells the oxen that normally are strapped to a yoke, then the yoke is not included in the sale. You have to stipulate both. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Hadamim Modian. So Rabbi Yehuda says, I disagree. Sometimes, even if you just stipulate one without the other, the cash price, the cash price will be indicative of what's included in the sale. Keitzad, Amar lo machor li tzimadcha b'masayim zuz, hadavar yadua she'inat tzimed b'masayim zuz. So, for example, let's say a buyer, Shimon, comes to Reuven and says, sell me your yoke. And Reuven says, that'll be 200 zuz. Well, everyone knows that a yoke does not cost 200 zuz. A yoke is probably 10 zuz, something like that. And it's the oxen that draw, that are attached to the yoke that are much more expensive. So the price is indicative of the fact that even though the guy just said yoke, he means yoke and oxen. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says in that situation, the sale is automatically the yoke and the oxen. But v'chachamim omrim ein adamim raya. The chachamim say no. The purchase price is not indicative at all. But then the question becomes well, then what do we do in a situation where a guy says, hey, I paid you $200, I get this measly yoke.
Oh, no.
Can he, is it ona or not? So then that's the question. We'll see that in just a minute. The Gemara now says, Tani Rav Tachlifa bar Ma'arava Kameda Rebbe Yava, hu mocher es hakron, mocher es haprados. So Rav Tachlifa was in possession mentally of a brisa that he had learned, and he recited it before Rebbe Yavo. And the brisa stated that if a person sells a wagon, then the mules are included in the sale. Ay v'ha'anan lo mocher tznan. What are you going to do with our Mishnah, which says explicitly the other way, that the mules are not included in the sale? So Amar lei ismaye. So Rav Tachlifa says, you know what, maybe I should erase that brisa from my catalog. Maybe this is an erroneous brisa. So Amar lei lo, titargem masnisecha ba'adukim bo. So he said to him, no. Rabbi who said, no, the brisa is true also. It all depends on the circumstances. If when Shimon comes to Reuven and says, I'd like to buy your wagon, the mules are saddled to the wagon, they're hitched to the wagon at the time when he comes over to him, then the circumstances indicate that what was meant in the purchase are the mules as well. So here, what we're basically saying is that everybody would agree, both the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda would agree, that when the buyer goes over to the seller in front of the wagon where the mules are hitched already to the wagon, or the oxen are attached to the yoke, everyone would agree that in that case it is a package deal because it's implicit in the circumstance. Our mission is talking about where we're not in the presence of the wagon, or the wagon is currently unhitched from the mules. In that situation, that's where the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda are going to argue whether the purchase price is indicative of the package or not. Let's go on. Mocher es hatzemed lo mocher es habakar v'chulei. If a guy sells the yoke, the oxen are not included. So hey chidami. So the Gemara now says now we have to get down to the semantics. Ilema dekaru litzimda tzimda v'la bakar bakar pshita tzimda zavit le bakar lo zavit. The Gemara says if you're dealing with a locale where they call a yoke, and they call oxen, so obviously, if I say I'm selling you a yoke, the oxen are not included. The livestock are not included because that's not what you call a yoke. A yoke is a yoke. So ve'ela dekoru leinami labakar tzimda kulei zavinlei. And if we're dealing with a locale where the word yoke means the yoke and the oxen, that's what
Yoke
they
of oxen.
the yoke of oxen, right? Well, then why shouldn't it be a package deal, right? Because that's the vernacular. So the Gemara says, "Lo tzricha ba'asu dekaru le'litzimda tzimda v'labakar bakar v'ikanami dekaru labakar tzimda." The answer is that we're dealing with a locale where sometimes the verbiage is ambiguous. Most people, when they call a yoke, when they say yoke, they mean just the yoke, and when they say bakar, they mean just the cattle. But sometimes, when a person says yoke, he means yoke of oxen, like Rabbi Berman said, right? That's really what he means. So therefore, it's a little bit ambiguous, and that's therefore the case where we have this machlokas. Rabbi Yehuda savar hadomim modiin, v'Rabbanan savri ein hadomim raya. That Rabbi Yehuda says that you look at the purchase price, and if the guy says, I'm selling you a yoke for 200 zuz, so it's understood that he's buying both the yoke and the oxen. And the Chachamim say no. The guy can say, after Shimon has given him the 200 zuz, Reuven can say, here's your yoke. And the guy says, well, where's my oxen? He said, that wasn't included in the sale. You needed to specify that. What about the fact that I've paid 200 zuz, which is an exorbitant amount for just a piece of leather? So the ein hadamim raya lihava bittul mekach. That was what Rabbi Berman asked. He says, what about the problem of onah? We know that if you get ripped off, someone it's a mekach tos. Well, it's right. It's in a sense it's a mekach tos because the guy can say, the fact that I overpaid, the standard purchase price of a yoke is far less than this, and therefore I'm entitled to a refund. And maybe you'll argue that the Chachamim hold that you cannot reverse the sale. The sale is final. So velo v'hatnan, that you can say because we learned our Mishnah in Bava Basra, where it said Rabbi Yehuda Omer Hamocher Sefer Torah Behemu Margolis Ein Lahem Ona'ah, and Amr Lolo Amr Eles Es Elu. So there's a Mishnah in Bava Basra that says like this, that there are only three types of commodities that are not subject to the laws of ona'ah, where a buyer can reverse or a seller can reverse if either the buyer was ripped off or the seller was ripped off. And the three things that are not subject to ona'ah are real estate, servants, and contracts and shtaras, right? But anything else, the Mishnah says, is subject to the laws of ona'ah, where you can reverse a sale. And Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Rabbi Yehuda says that when you sell a Sefer Torah, when you sell an animal, and when you sell a precious gem or a pearl, those things also are not subject to onah because they're unique commodities, and the value is in the eye of the beholder, right? But the Chachamim disagree with that. The Chachamim say animals, livestock, are subject to the laws of onah, and therefore presumably a yoke and livestock are subject to the laws of onah. You see that very clearly. So why can't the buyer say, I want my money back? So the Gemara says, well, one answer is, my ein domim raya nami tekatanu dahavi bittul mekach. Taka, that's the law. In other words, when the Chachamim say that after Shimon paid his 200 zuz, he can't argue that he's entitled to the livestock because the seller only meant the yoke, but what Shimon is entitled to is to get his money back. Shimon can say, okay, I want my money back, and that's fine. The only thing that he doesn't have a right to is to demand that Reuven deliver the livestock. Reuven can say, I only meant to sell you the yoke. If you thought you were going to get a package deal, I'm sorry, here's your money back. That's what the Chachamim mean. The Ibai say, but I'll give you another answer, which could also be the halacha. Ki omer rabbanan ona'o bittul mekach bichdei shahadas toya. Aval bichdei she'ena das toya lo, kama, because Amar Matana Yahev Le. And the Gemara says like this. In reality, when the rabbis say that the laws of ona'ah are in place to prevent a buyer from getting ripped off, that's only when the evidence shows that the buyer was unsuspecting and innocent and did not know that he was getting overcharged. But what about a situation where a buyer clearly should have known that the price that he's paying far exceeds the amount of the value of the item that he's buying? Can you say that the person was ripped off? Can you say, if you come over to me and you want to sell me a widget, and widgets only go for $5, and you say, I'll sell it to you for $100, and everyone knows the value of widgets. Everyone knows how much a widget costs. Can you really say that I didn't know and I gave you $100? No, you don't say that. What do you say? You say that I had Rahmanas on you. I didn't want to embarrass you by offering you charity. So I said, you know what? I'll buy your widget for $100. And that's really what the guy meant to do. And therefore, when Shimon paid 200 zuz for a yoke, the way we interpret it is this according to the Chachamim. It's not that you didn't know. It's not that you thought maybe the cattle were included. The fact is that Reuven said a yoke, and therefore you have to accept, unless you stipulated cattle, you have to accept that all you purchase is a yoke. What about the fact that you paid so much money and now you're shrine that the next day after you took delivery of the yoke, you say, where's my cattle? You know what? At the time you really meant to only buy the yoke, and you were giving him a gift of 200 zuz, even though the yoke is worth far less. And now you've decided to change your tune. That's the way we interpret it according to the Chachamim. And therefore, if you want to demand a reversal of the sale, the burden of proof is on you. That's the conclusion of the Gemara, and we'll hold it here for today. We'll continue Mirz Hashem tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Rabbi Chanan ben Akasha Omer Ratzah HaKodesh.